Late evening at Mercy General Hospital was supposed to be calm, but tonight was anything but. Brianna Rivera trailed behind Amanda, her clipboard tucked under her arm. Her ponytail swayed with each step as she mentally planned a detour to the vending machine. "Room 217, Amanda said briskly. "Routine post-op check. Let me do the talking." Bree frowned. "Why? Difficult patient?" Amanda sighed. "Just don't start anything." Bree smirked faintly. "When have I ever started anything?" Amanda didn't answer, which said plenty. The patient rested quietly, his breathing steady. A suited man stood in the corner, his sharp gaze tracking the nurses as they entered, silent but watchful. Bree ignored him, checking the monitor while Amanda flipped through the chart. The door slammed open. "Who's in charge of this patient?" The commanding voice cut through the room like a whip. Bree looked up, irritation sparking. The woman who entered moved with purpose, her light brown hair falling loosely around her shoulders. Her icy blue eyes, sharp yet tired, scanned the room. She carried herself like someone who always got what she wanted. Amanda stiffened. "Get out!" The woman's lips twitched slightly. "That's no way to greet your family, Mandy." Amanda's grip on the clipboard tightened. "Family or not, you always bring problems, Valentina." Valentina's gaze shifted to the patient. Her voice was firm. "He needs to be discharged tonight." Amanda gawked. "You can't be serious. He's not ready." Valentina cut her off. "Tonight." Bree had heard enough. "This is a hospital, not your personal clubhouse," she said sharply. "You don't get to waltz in here and start barking orders." Valentina turned to the suited man in the corner, addressing him instead. Bree folded her arms. "Very mature of you to ignore me." Valentina paused, then turned back, her icy blue eyes locking onto Bree's. For a brief moment, the room seemed to fade. Her gray eyes reminded Valentina of a winter morning from childhood. A snow day filled with laughter and snowball fights, back when life was simple. For just a heartbeat, Valentina didn't feel powerful. She was just a little girl, longing for a time when things were easy. "Do I know you?" Valentina asked softly. Bree blinked, startled. "No," she said firmly. "Don't think so." Amanda stepped between them, her voice sharp. "Enough, Valentina. Leave." Valentina lingered for a moment before stepping toward the door. "Fine," she said lightly. At the door, she glanced back at Amanda. In perfect Italian, she said, "Careful, Mandy. She's got more fire than you." Bree's brows rose. Without hesitation, she replied in flawless Italian, her tone cool. "Try using manners next time." Valentina froze for a second, then chuckled softly before leaving. As the door closed, Amanda sighed heavily. "What a piece of work," Bree muttered. "You don't know the half of it," Amanda replied. Bree frowned. "Who was that?" Amanda hesitated. "My cousin, Valentina Moretti." The name settled in Bree's mind like a bad taste. "Explains the attitude," she muttered, turning back to her work. Valentina Moretti was not used to being ignored. She had always prided herself on her sharp memory. Faces, names, voices, every detail locked in her mind like pieces of a puzzle. Yet no matter how many times she replayed the interaction, Brianna Rivera remained an enigma. Valentina had met countless people in her life, but Bree's stormy gray eyes lingered in her thoughts like a haunting melody she couldn't place. At first, Valentina told herself it was nothing, a passing curiosity. But the more she replayed that sharp wit and quiet defiance, the more Brianna felt like a challenge. And Valentina loved challenges. The first bouquet arrived on a Monday. Bree barely looked up from her chart when Amanda placed the pristine white roses on the counter in front of her. "For you," Amanda said. her tone dripping with mock sweetness as she leaned against the nurse's station. Bree frowned. Me? Why? Amanda snorted, pulling a small card from the bouquet and waving it dramatically. Oh, come on. I think we both know who's behind this. Bree hesitated before grabbing the card, her brow furrowing as she read the neat handwriting. To the nurse who made my night far more entertaining than it had any right to be. Valentina. At the bottom, neatly written, was a phone number. Groaning, Bree shoved the card back into the bouquet. Are you serious? By Friday, the deliveries were impossible to ignore. And after a week of relentless gestures, Bree had practically memorized the phone number that accompanied every single card. This time, it wasn't flowers or chocolates. It was a giant teddy bear, propped up at the nurse's station with a ribbon and a gleaming envelope pinned to its chest. Amanda spotted it first, bursting into laughter. Oh, this is priceless! Bree froze, her eyes narrowing. What is that? Amanda smirked, plucking the envelope from the bear. You've officially entered rom-com territory, Bree. Bree snatched the card from her, reading the handwritten note. To the woman who's harder to win over than an army of men. Challenge accepted. Valentina. Oh, for the love of... Bree groaned, shoving the card back into the envelope. Amanda grinned. At this rate, she's going to start writing you poetry. Valentina waited for Brianna to reach out over the weekend. Every time her phone buzzed, she couldn't help but hope it was her. But as the hours passed and no call came, Valentina wasn't discouraged. If anything, Bree's silence made her even more excited. By Monday, the entire nurse's station looked like a florist's shop. Every nurse on Bree's floor had received a bouquet of flowers. Bright, colorful, and undeniably expensive, they sat clustered on desks and counters, filling the air with a heady mix of scents. Bree froze in the doorway, her eyes widening. What is all this? One of the nurses grinned, holding up her bouquet. Apparently, someone has a huge crush on you. Bree's stomach sank as she spotted a familiar envelope with her name on it. She snatched it up, reading the handwritten note. I hope your team enjoys the flowers, but my favorite nurse still owes me a call. Valentina. Before Bree could shove the card into her pocket, Amanda strolled in, eyeing the chaos with mock horror. Ew, I never thought I'd say this, but I just got flowers from my cousin. Gross. Bree waved the card at her. What is wrong with her? I'm not calling her. The whole Monday shift, Bree only heard one thing from her colleagues. How lovely Valentina was. How charming it was that she'd sent flowers to the entire floor. And how Bree should really give her a chance. Bree left work with one thought. Valentina's persistence was going to drive her mad. The evening had been blissfully uneventful, until Bree turned the corner and saw her. Valentina Moretti leaned casually against the nurse's station, dressed in a fitted leather jacket over a plain white t-shirt and dark jeans. Her usual sharp elegance was tempered by her casual look, but the spark of mischief in her blue eyes remained. Good evening, Brianna, Valentina said smoothly. Bree let out an audible sigh. What are you doing here? Valentina tilted her head, her lips curving into a small, playful smile. I came to spend some time with my favorite nurse. Bree let out a sharp breath and snapped her chart shut. I'd rather spend time with someone who doesn't make me want to throw a clipboard. Valentina's grin widened as she leaned in slightly, her voice dropping into a playful murmur. Oh? So you like it rough? Bree froze, heat rushing to her face as her grip on the clipboard tightened. That's not what I meant, she said through gritted teeth, glaring at Valentina. Valentina straightened, laughing softly. Relax, Brianna. I'm only teasing. But you know, she added, her tone turning mock serious. For a nurse, you're not very empathetic. You're breaking my heart more and more each day. Bree raised an unimpressed eyebrow. I don't get paid enough to be empathetic to stuck-up people like you. Stuck up? Valentina echoed, placing a hand over her chest in mock offense. That's harsh. I prefer to think of myself as determined. Call it whatever you want, Bree muttered. I'm still not interested. Not even in dinner? Valentina asked, her tone softening but her confidence unshaken. One meal. You pick the place. No flowers, no teddy bears. Just me, apologizing for being persistent. I'm busy, Bree said curtly, brushing past her without another glance. Good night, Brianna, Valentina called, her voice almost sing-song as she strode toward the exit. I always win in the end. Bree gritted her teeth, muttering, not this time, even as she felt her pulse quicken. Another week of endless flowers, teasing notes and coy smiles passed, and Brianna had finally reached her breaking point. She couldn't take another bouquet or hear another nurse gush about how romantic Valentina's gestures were. The moment her shift ended, she pulled out her phone and dialed the number she'd been stubbornly ignoring. It rang twice before the line connected. Who's this? Valentina's voice came through, calm but cautious, as though she didn't expect to be called by an unknown number. It's Brianna, Bree snapped, already annoyed. You know, the nurse you've been pestering for weeks? There was a brief pause, and then Valentina's tone shifted, warm and maddeningly playful. Brianna? What a pleasant surprise. Enough, Bree said sharply. The flowers, the notes, the everything. It all stops. Right now. Another pause, this one deliberate, before Valentina's voice softened into something dangerously smooth. You never asked me to stop, Brianna. If you had, I would have. Bree froze, her grip tightening on the phone. What? You never actually said the words, Valentina continued, her tone light but laced with smug amusement. I thought I was being charming. I didn't realize it was such a problem. Bree let out a sharp breath, forcing herself to stay calm. Okay, fine. Dinner. One meal. But as you said, one meal. I choose where, and after that you stop with all of this nonsense. Deal, Valentina replied immediately, no hesitation. When and where? Bree clenched her jaw. Tomorrow, 8. I'll text you the address. Perfect, Valentina said smoothly, her tone as irritatingly confident as ever. Bree hung up without another word, already planning her revenge. The next evening, Bree arrived early at the burger joint she'd chosen. A rundown shack with a buzzing neon sign and the smell of grease wafting through the air. Let's see how Miss Moneybags likes this, Bree thought, crossing her arms as she waited. At exactly 8 o'clock, Valentina's sleek black car pulled up, its polished finish glaringly out of place in the gravel lot. She stepped out in dark jeans, a leather jacket, and boots that looked casual yet expensive, somehow managing to make the whole scene feel intentional. Brianna, Valentina greeted smoothly, her calm tone matched by an unreadable expression as she glanced at the shack. You said I could pick, Bree said, her arms crossed as she waited for the first crack in Valentina's composure. And I'm glad you did, Valentina replied with a faint smile, walking past her and heading inside. To Bree's irritation, Valentina didn't flinch at the greasy smell or sticky counters. Instead, she strode confidently to the counter and ordered a double cheeseburger, fries, and a root beer, like she'd been here a dozen times before. You're actually going to eat here? Bree asked, raising an eyebrow. Valentina turned, her smirk sharp. You thought I wouldn't? Bree shrugged. Guess I expected something a little more dramatic. Valentina bit back a laugh. I can appreciate a good burger, Brianna. I'm not as predictable as you think. They sat in a corner booth, the table sticky with years of wear. Bree made a point of scrolling through her phone, pretending to be bored as Valentina ate her food with perfect composure. You're putting in a lot of effort to pretend you're not enjoying yourself, Valentina remarked, casually dipping a fry in ketchup. I'm not pretending, Bree replied flatly, scrolling harder for emphasis. Valentina leaned in slightly, her voice dipping into a softer, teasing tone. No? Then why did you agree to dinner? Bree froze for a moment, then snapped, to get you to stop. Valentina hummed, clearly unconvinced. Her smirk widened as she leaned back, completely at ease. As the meal continued, Bree's irritation only grew, not because of Valentina's behavior, but because nothing seemed to rattle her. Every calculated glare or pointed remark Bree threw was met with amused patience, as if Valentina found it all endearing. Outside, as they parted ways, Valentina paused by her car and glanced at Brianna, her eyes still sparkling with mischief. Do you need a ride home? She asked, her tone deceptively casual. Brianna's eyes narrowed suspiciously. So you can have my home address? No thanks. I'll call an Uber. Valentina's lips curved into a soft, almost secretive smile, as if she didn't already know exactly where Brianna lived. As if Brianna wasn't the only thing occupying her thoughts for the past week. We should do this more often, Valentina said smoothly, her tone inviting but not pushing. Brianna shot her a glare. I said it was only once. Don't get your hopes up. Valentina chuckled softly, stepping back toward her car, with a grace that only made Brianna's annoyance deepen. Good night, Brianna, she said, her voice warm and maddeningly confident. You're more fun than I expected. Brianna watched as Valentina got into her sleek black car and drove off, leaving her standing in the dim glow of the burger joint's neon sign. She let out a frustrated sigh, crossing her arms tightly as she waited for her Uber. But the lingering echo of Valentina's laughter followed her like a taunt she couldn't quite shake. And she hated that it wasn't entirely unpleasant. Brianna opened the front door quietly, but Leo's excited footsteps still came running toward her. Mommy! He shouted, wrapping his arms around her legs. She scooped him up, his weight familiar and comforting. You should be in bed, little man. Grandma said you were with a friend, he mumbled sleepily, his head resting on her shoulder. In the kitchen, her mother leaned casually against the fridge, a knowing smirk on her face. So, how was the date? It wasn't a date, Bree replied curtly, setting Leo down and avoiding her mother's gaze. Her mother arched an eyebrow. No? I saw you fixing your makeup twice before you left, and I can't remember the last time you went anywhere without Leo. Bree rolled her eyes, grabbing a glass of water from the sink. It was just dinner, that's all. Her mother hummed, clearly unconvinced. Bree didn't bother arguing. The entire evening replayed in her mind. Valentina's unwavering confidence, her effortless charm, and how none of Bree's attempts to rattle her had worked. She's annoying, Bree muttered to herself, more than to her mother. Her mom just smiled. Good night, Bree. Bree didn't reply, ushering Leo toward his room. In her own bed, Bree tossed and turned, her frustration refusing to let her rest. No matter how hard she tried, Valentina's smirk lingered in her thoughts. Unbelievable, she thought, groaning into her pillow. Across the city, Valentina stood on her penthouse balcony, a glass of whiskey in hand. The city lights stretched far below her, glittering like scattered stars. She swirled the drink absently, her mind not on the meeting she had scheduled the next morning, or the responsibilities that always loomed over her. Instead, she found herself thinking of Brianna Rivera, the nurse with the sharp tongue and guarded heart. Valentina smirked to herself, taking a slow sip of her drink. She'd expected the dinner to be entertaining, but Bree had been more than that. She was bold, unfiltered, and unshaken by Valentina's presence in a way no one else dared to be. Valentina's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her smirk widening when she saw the text from Amanda. "So, how was your little burger date?" Valentina chuckled, typing back. "Let's just say she's worth the chase." Brianna sipped her coffee, glaring at Amanda, who sat across from her with a smug grin. "So," Amanda began, tapping her pen on the counter, "did my cousin send another round of flowers today? Or did she go straight to fireworks?" "Don't give her ideas," Bree muttered, her irritation clear. Amanda laughed. "You've got to admit, she's got game, and she's hot." Bree lowered her cup, narrowing her eyes. "And she's your cousin." Amanda shrugged, unbothered. "Doesn't mean I'm wrong." Bree groaned, setting her coffee down. "I'm serious. There's something weird about her. The way people act around her, it's like they're scared." Amanda leaned forward, her grin widening. "Scared?" "Bree, are you saying my cousin is, wait for it, a Mafia Queen?" "Don't start," Bree snapped, shaking her head. "Come on," Amanda teased. "Sharp suits, leather jackets, people looking like they've seen a ghost? It adds up." Before Bree could respond, her pager buzzed. She stood, muttering, "I don't have time for this." "Sure you don't," Amanda called after her. "Just make sure I'm the first to know about the wedding." She wiggled her eyebrows, laughing as Bree shot her a glare. As she walked away, Bree shook her head, though a reluctant smile tugged at her lips. Valentina Moretti rarely allowed herself moments of vulnerability. In her world, weakness wasn't just a liability, it was a death sentence. Seated at the head of a mahogany table in a dimly lit room, Valentina surveyed the tense faces of her most trusted men. "The shipment didn't arrive," she said coldly. "Why?" No one spoke until Marco shifted uneasily. "There was interference." "Interference?" Valentina's sharp tone cut him off. Her piercing blue eyes locked on him, unrelenting. "That's not an answer, Marco. That's an excuse." Marco swallowed hard, his gaze falling to the table. Valentina leaned forward, her voice soft but deadly. "Find out who betrayed us. Make sure they regret it." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room as Valentina stood, dismissing them with a single wave of her hand. The same evening, on the other side of town, Brianna Rivera sat cross-legged on her living room floor, a tangle of Lego pieces scattered between her and her 6-year-old son, Leo. "Mommy, this one goes here," Leo said, holding up a tiny red block with the utmost seriousness. "Are you sure?" Bree asked, tilting her head as if she were truly considering it. Leo huffed, his little brow furrowing. "Yes, look, it matches the picture." He pointed to the instruction booklet, his finger smudging the glossy page. "All right, boss," Bree said with a grin, snapping the piece into place. For a moment, the only sounds in the apartment were the soft clinking of Lego bricks and the faint hum of the heater kicking on. The chaos of her workday and Valentina's infuriating charm felt like distant memories in the quiet comfort of her home. Later, Valentina sat alone in her office with a glass of whiskey, staring out at the city lights. Her leather jacket hung over the back of her chair, leaving her in a simple black shirt. The whiskey tasted sharp, but it didn't dull the weight pressing on her shoulders. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. A text from Marco. We found the traitor. Awaiting your instructions. Valentina stared at the message, her finger hovering over the screen. For a moment, she imagined what Bree would think of her life, the decisions she made daily. Finally, she typed back a simple response. Handle it. I don't need details. As she leaned back in her chair, Valentina let out a slow breath. The weight of her responsibilities lingered. When Bree and Leo finished building the spaceship, he held it up with a triumphant smile. See? I told you it would work. Bree clapped her hands dramatically. Amazing. A masterpiece. Her life wasn't glamorous. It was messy, tiring, and sometimes lonely. But it was hers, and Leo made every long shift and sleepless night worth it. As she turned off the light and closed the door, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A quick glance at the screen made her pause. A text from Amanda. How was dinner with my charming cousin? Bree rolled her eyes and typed back, I survived. Barely. But as she placed the phone face down and grabbed a glass of water, her thoughts betrayed her. Despite everything, Valentina's irritatingly confident smirk crept into her mind. With a sigh, Bree shook her head and muttered to herself, Unbelievable. Another chart, another order, another problem. Brianna hadn't stopped moving all evening, and the weight of the shift was beginning to wear on her. She didn't look up until Dr. Reiner's sharp voice cut through the noise. Nurse, he snapped, tossing a file onto the counter. This blood work should have been on my desk an hour ago. Do I have to explain how to prioritize? Brianna's grip on her pen tightened. I sent the request as soon as you ordered it. The lab is backed up. It's out of my hands. Excuses, Reiner began, crossing his arms. Maybe if you spent less time. Miss Moretti? He stammered suddenly, his tone shifting from sharp to uncertain. Brianna turned, startled to see Valentina standing just a few feet away. She was poised as always, her tailored blazer immaculate, her sharp blue eyes fixed on Reiner. Long time no see, Valentina said smoothly, her lips curving into a faint smile. I presume you've met my good friend Brianna, correct? Yes, Reiner said quickly, his tone now conciliatory. She's, a very thorough nurse. Excellent, really. He hesitated, glancing nervously between them. Sorry, Brianna. I'm new here, and I didn't realize the labs could be so backed up. Brianna raised an eyebrow, too surprised to respond. Well, I'll get back to work, Reiner added hastily, clutching the file and retreating with a tight, nervous smile. As he disappeared around the corner, Brianna turned to Valentina, crossing her arms. What just happened? Valentina shrugged lightly. Just catching up with an old acquaintance. And the my good friend part? Brianna asked, her tone dry. Would you rather I said my favorite nurse? Valentina replied, her faint smile widening. Bree rolled her eyes, but couldn't stifle a small smirk. What are you even doing here? Valentina's smile turned apologetic as she gestured toward the elevators. I was just dropping off something for Amanda. She left her laptop charger at dinner last week. Thought I'd save her from another day of complaining about dead batteries. Brianna frowned, skeptical, but unable to fault the logic. Don't worry, Valentina added lightly. I'm not here to annoy you. Bree raised an eyebrow, unsure whether to believe her. You? Not annoying me? That's a first. Valentina chuckled softly. Guess I'm full of surprises. Have a good evening, Brianna. As Valentina walked away, Bree turned back to her charts. For a fleeting moment, she thought about suggesting coffee to repay her. But the idea vanished as quickly as it came. Her life didn't need any more complications. The graveyard was quiet, the air heavy with damp earth and the scent of rain. Valentina knelt down, lowering a bouquet of white roses to the ground. "Hey, Leo," she murmured. "It's been a while. You'd probably give me hell for that." Her lips twitched into a faint smile before fading. "After they took you, I thought I'd break. But breaking wasn't an option. Not if I wanted to stop them from doing it to anyone else." She exhaled sharply. "So I flipped the switch, stopped feeling, and built something they couldn't tear down. I made them pay, Leo. Every last one of them." The words hung in the air, and her mask slipped. "But it didn't bring you back. It never will." Her voice softened as she continued. "I've met someone. She reminds me of you. She's strong in ways that are hard to explain, the kind of strong that doesn't flinch, even when she should." Her fingers brushed over the roses. "You'd probably tell me to stay away, and you'd be right." Her lips curved faintly. "But she has this fire, Leo. This quiet, unshakable fire. Just like you did. It's not the same as yours, but it's close enough to hurt." She paused, her gaze distant. "You were like a brother to me. The one who always believed I could be better." Her voice dropped. "Losing you was like losing a part of myself, and I've been trying to fill that void ever since." Standing, Valentina glanced at the flowers one last time. "I miss you," she said quietly. Without another word, she walked away, leaving the roses to sway gently in the breeze. The fluorescent lights of the pharmacy buzzed faintly, casting sharp shadows against the empty aisles. Brianna moved on autopilot, exhaustion dragging at her limbs as she reached for the medicine her son needed. Turning the corner, she stopped short. Valentina stood a few feet away, leaning against the shelf. She wasn't her usual composed self. Her coat was unevenly buttoned, her hair loose around her face, and there was a glassy, faraway look in her eyes. "Valentina?" Brianna called out, her voice sharper than she intended. Valentina turned, her blue eyes meeting Brianna's. For a moment, she said nothing, then managed a faint smile that didn't quite reach her face. "Brianna? Fancy running into you here." "You don't look great," Brianna said, eyeing her carefully. "Are you okay?" Valentina gave a small, hollow laugh. "I didn't think I looked that bad." "You look like you're about to pass out," Brianna replied bluntly. Valentina shook her head and leaned more heavily against the shelf. "It's nothing. I'll be fine." Brianna stepped closer, setting the medicine in her basket. "What's going on?" "It's not important," Valentina said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't need to worry about me. I'll be fine." Brianna frowned, crossing her arms. "You don't look fine. Let me call someone, or at least sit down for a second." For a moment, Valentina didn't move. Then she let out a quiet breath, her tired eyes meeting Brianna's. "You've got a good heart," she said softly. "But I'm fine, really." Brianna frowned, unconvinced. "You don't look fine," she repeated. "Is there anything I can help you with?" Valentina tilted her head slightly, a faint, weary smile tugging at her lips. "I've been through worse. This is nothing I can't handle." Her tone was calm, almost dismissive, but there was something about the way she spoke, detached and resigned, that left Brianna uneasy. The evening was quiet, the hum of the apartment settling around Brianna as she flipped through the book in her lap. A rare moment of peace, she thought, until a sharp knock at the door shattered the silence. She frowned, setting the book down and standing. It was late. Too late for visitors. Before she could reach the door, Leo's small voice called out, "Mom! Someone's here!" Brianna hurried, rounding the corner just in time to see her son standing in the open doorway. Her breath caught when she saw who was on the other side. Valentina Moretti stood there, her usually pristine appearance slightly frayed. She seemed almost hesitant, her sharp blue eyes fixed on Leo with something akin to surprise. "Who are you?" Valentina asked softly, tilting her head. Leo puffed out his chest. "Who are you?" "Hey," Brianna called, her tone sharp as she rushed to the door. "What are you doing? You shouldn't be opening doors for strangers. Go to your room." Leo hesitated, glancing between his mother and Valentina, before stomping off with a pout. Brianna turned back to Valentina, her brow furrowing. "What are you doing here?" Valentina's gaze lingered down the hall where Leo had disappeared before returning to Brianna. "I might actually need your help." "How do you even know where I live?" Brianna asked, arms crossed. Valentina's lips curved into a faint smirk. "I don't think you want to know how." "Figures," Brianna muttered. "Come in before my neighbors start staring." Valentina stepped inside, her movements stiff and unsteady. Brianna caught it immediately, her eyes narrowing. "You're hurt," she said flatly. "It's nothing serious," Valentina said lightly, though the strain in her voice betrayed her. She shrugged off her coat, revealing a thin shirt and a clear red swelling along her side. Brianna's breath hitched. "That's not nothing. It's infected." "What happened?" Valentina lowered herself onto the couch with a faint grimace. "I can't tell you much," she said quietly. "Amanda isn't home and you're the only one I trust around here." Brianna stared at her for a long moment before exhaling in frustration. "Right, because I'm the sane one in your orbit." She grabbed her first aid kit and knelt by the couch. "You've been bothering me for weeks at work, and now you conveniently forget where the hospital is?" "I had my reasons," Valentina said, her voice even. "You always do." Brianna didn't push further, focusing instead on cleaning the wound. Brianna rolled her eyes. "You need antibiotics. This is a temporary fix, but you should get it looked at properly." "Thank you," Valentina said, her tone unusually soft. Brianna leaned back, packing up her kit. "You know, showing up here in the middle of the night, cryptic as hell, isn't exactly endearing." Valentina's lips twitched into a faint smile. "You're still helping me, though." "Barely," Brianna muttered, standing. "Stay there. I'll make you some tea or something." Valentina blinked, startled by the offer. "Tea?" "You look like you need it," Brianna said over her shoulder as she disappeared into the kitchen. Valentina leaned back against the couch, letting out a quiet breath. The soft glow of the living room lamp bathed the room in warm light as Brianna sat on the armchair across from Valentina. The tension was palpable, the silence stretching long enough that Brianna almost wished she hadn't invited her in. Valentina broke the quiet first, her voice low and calm. "You never mentioned you had a kid." Brianna shrugged, leaning back in her chair. "You never asked." Her tone was sharp, her arms crossed. "But hey, now that you know, maybe you'll finally leave me alone." Valentina tilted her head, her lips curving into a faint smirk. "You're funny." "I wasn't joking," Brianna shot back, her voice dry. "Neither was I." Valentina's smirk lingered, but her eyes remained fixed on Brianna, studying her. Brianna shifted under the weight of Valentina's gaze. "You seemed surprised when you saw him. What did you expect? That I didn't have a life outside of work?" "I didn't expect anything," Valentina said smoothly, her tone almost too casual. "But I admit, you caught me off guard." "Good," Brianna replied curtly. Valentina let out a soft chuckle, shaking her head. "I have to ask," Brianna said finally, breaking the silence. "What is it you actually do? What's your job? What do you do that has you showing up here in the middle of the night with a wound you won't explain?" Valentina's smirk didn't falter. I'm in logistics. Brianna blinked, unimpressed. Logistics? Yes, Valentina replied smoothly. Managing resources, coordinating movements, ensuring smooth operations. Very official. Brianna's stare was flat. You're describing a crime ring. Am I? Valentina's smirk didn't falter. Brianna let out an exasperated sigh. You're exhausting. Most people find me charming, Valentina said lightly. I'm not most people. That's what I like about you. Brianna shook her head, biting back a remark. So you can't tell me anything? That it? It's not personal, Valentina said softly. It feels personal. Valentina's smile faded slightly. It's safer this way. For both of us. Brianna frowned. Safer? What does that even mean? Valentina hesitated, her gaze flickering briefly. It means getting too close to me doesn't end well for most people. Let's leave it at that. Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken meaning. Brianna studied her carefully, her expression unreadable. Well, thanks for clearing absolutely nothing up, she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. You're welcome, Valentina said lightly, the smirk returning. Silence hung between them, heavier now. Brianna leaned back, exhaling slowly. Well, Valentina said, standing carefully, her movements deliberate. I don't want to disturb you any more than necessary. I should go. Brianna glanced at the clock, then back at Valentina. For a moment she hesitated, her thoughts racing. Finally, she sighed. You shouldn't be wandering around in your condition. Stay in the guest room tonight. Valentina raised an eyebrow, surprised. That's generous of you. Don't read into it, Brianna said quickly, standing. It's just practical. Of course, Valentina replied, her lips twitching into a faint smile. Practical. Brianna ignored the comment, already walking toward the hallway. It's the door on the left. There are extra blankets in the closet. Valentina followed slowly, pausing in the doorway of the guest room. She glanced back at Brianna, her expression unreadable. Thank you, Brianna. Brianna met her gaze, then nodded curtly. Just try not to make a habit of this. Valentina chuckled softly. Good night. Good night, Brianna replied, watching as Valentina disappeared into the room. She exhaled, the tension in her chest easing slightly as she turned off the lights and headed to her own bedroom. Whatever this was between them, it wasn't simple, and it wasn't over. The aroma of coffee hung in the air as Brianna stood by the coffee maker, sipping from her mug and waiting for the caffeine to kick in. She glanced up when the sound of soft footsteps came from the hallway. Valentina appeared in the doorway, her hair slightly tousled and her usual sharpness dulled. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking around the unfamiliar kitchen before stepping inside. Morning, Brianna said, her voice calm but curious. Morning, Valentina replied, her tone unusually subdued as she moved toward the coffee pot. Brianna motioned to the coffee pot. Help yourself. Valentina poured a mug and cradled it like a lifeline. She was halfway through her first sip when small footsteps pattered into the kitchen. Leo shuffled in, rubbing his eyes. He froze when he saw Valentina. Valentina froze too, her mug halfway to her lips. Who are you? Leo asked, tilting his head. Brianna stifled a laugh. Leo, this is Valentina. She's a friend. Leo squinted at her suspiciously. Why are you here? She needed a place to stay last night, Brianna explained. Leo squinted again. Why do you look so scary? Valentina froze, caught off guard. Scary? Yeah, Leo said, like a bad guy in cartoons, the ones that don't sleep and look spooky. Brianna nearly spat out her coffee. Valentina gave a tight smile. I don't think I look spooky. You do, Leo said confidently. Do you even sleep? You look like you haven't slept in years. Valentina glanced at Brianna. Your kid is observant. Oh, he's something, Brianna replied with a grin. I'm just being honest, Leo said unapologetically. Brianna leaned against the counter, her grin widening. It's probably the cheekbones. All villains have cheekbones like yours. Sharp, dramatic, a little scary. Valentina set her mug down, fixing Brianna with a deadpan look. Thank you for your analysis. Don't act offended, Brianna teased. You've got the whole intimidating but glamorous thing. You're like a Disney villain come to life. Valentina tilted her head, smirking faintly. Seems like you've spent quite a bit of time analyzing my face. Brianna's retort died on her lips, a faint flush creeping onto her cheeks. She took another sip of coffee. I'm just stating the obvious, she muttered. Valentina chuckled softly. Sure you are. Breakfast passed with Leo chattering nonstop, his attention bouncing between his mom and their unexpected guest. Valentina, Leo said suddenly, tilting his head. Yes? She replied, glancing up. Your name is really long, he said matter-of-factly. Valentina arched an eyebrow. It's not that long. Leo ignored her, leaning forward. What does it mean? What does my name mean? Valentina repeated, surprised. Yeah, Leo said, his eyes bright with curiosity. It means strong and healthy, Valentina said thoughtfully. Why? Leo nodded seriously. That makes sense. You look strong. Are you healthy? Most of the time, Valentina replied, smirking. You didn't look healthy last night, Leo said bluntly. Bree stifled a laugh from the counter. Leo? What? He asked. She didn't. Valentina chuckled softly. I've had worse nights. Trust me. Leo grinned. Do you have a nickname? Val? Tina? Some people call me Val, Valentina admitted. But not Tina. Why not? Tina's fun. It just isn't me, Valentina replied, amused. Leo puffed out his chest. My name's cool too. My uncle told me it means lion, 'cause lions are brave and awesome. Valentina's faint smile faltered. Your uncle told you that? Yep, Leo said proudly. His name's Leo too. That's who I'm named after. He wrote me letters all about it. Valentina stiffened, her grip tightening on her mug. Your uncle's name is Leo? Yeah, Leo said cheerfully, stuffing the last bite of toast into his mouth. Bree glanced over, catching the faint shift in Valentina's demeanor. Her usual confident smirk was gone, replaced by something distant and tightly controlled. Valentina's blue eyes darkened, shadowed by a flicker of emotion Bree couldn't quite place. Shock? Sadness? Or something heavier? Valentina lowered her gaze, her fingers tightening around the mug as though grounding herself. It was only a moment, but Bree noticed. Valentina? Bree asked cautiously, her voice softer than usual. Valentina blinked, her mask slipping back into place with practiced ease. She smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. That's a strong name, she said evenly, her voice betraying just a hint of strain. Leo didn't notice the shift, too busy chattering about his drawings, but Bree's gaze lingered on Valentina. There was something there, something Bree wasn't sure she wanted to understand. Brianna stood in the middle of the room, her arms crossed tightly. Valentina, we need to talk. Valentina, perched on the edge of the couch, glanced up, But this time, the usual smirk that tugged at her lips was absent, replaced by something quieter, more serious. I figured as much. You can't keep doing this, Brianna said, her tone firm but strained. Showing up here without warning, acting like... She gestured vaguely, her frustration bubbling to the surface. Acting like it doesn't affect anything. Valentina leaned forward, her elbows resting on her knees. I know it affects things, she said softly. I know I've been... disruptive. Disruptive? Brianna repeated, a dry, incredulous laugh escaping her. You've been a wrecking ball. I'm trying to give Leo a stable life, and then you show up, wounded, bleeding, with whatever chaos follows you. Her voice rose, the anger and tension in her chest spilling out. What am I supposed to do with that? Valentina exhaled, her gaze fixed on the floor. You're right, she said after a beat. I shouldn't have come here. She looked up, her blue eyes sharp but sincere. I didn't think about what it would mean for you. I panicked and... She hesitated, running a hand through her hair. I ended up here. It was selfish. Brianna blinked, thrown off by the sudden apology. Her arms dropped slightly, though her frustration didn't fade. Then why do you keep doing it? Valentina's lips twitched, a faint, humorless smile forming. Because you're the only place I feel like I can breathe, Brianna. The words hit Brianna like a punch to the chest. Her throat tightened, and for a moment, she didn't know how to respond. That's not fair, she said finally, her voice quieter now but no less firm. You don't get to dump all of that on me and then expect me to... What? Be okay with it? I'm not expecting anything, Valentina said, standing slowly, her movements deliberate. I'm just telling you the truth. Brianna shook her head, her frustration bubbling over again. The truth is you make everything harder. You... She paused, searching for the words. You get under my skin, Valentina. You don't just throw things off balance. You make me question everything I thought I wanted. Valentina's expression shifted slightly, her usual composure slipping. Brianna, no. Brianna cut her off, stepping closer, her voice rising again. You think you can just say things like that? You think this is some game where you swoop in and what? Valentina interrupted, her voice quiet but steady. And make me feel like I'm losing control, Brianna admitted, her voice trembling with restrained emotion. The silence that followed was deafening. Valentina's smirk returned faintly, but her eyes softened, glinting with something closer to affection. You know, Valentina said smoothly, her voice low and steady. You're fascinating when you're angry. Brianna's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening. You think this is funny? No, Valentina replied, stepping closer, her smirk lingering. It's just cute, the way you try so hard to stay in control. Brianna froze, her breath catching for the briefest moment before her eyes darkened. Cute? She repeated, her tone sharp, each syllable clipped. She took a deliberate step forward, closing the gap between them. You think I'm cute? Another step. Let me tell you something, Valentina. Valentina instinctively leaned back, her smirk faltering as Brianna's presence pressed closer. You get under my skin, Brianna said, her voice dangerously quiet now. You make me lose focus, make me second-guess myself, and I hate it. Brianna took one last step, now standing so close that Valentina's breath hitched, her usual composure slipping entirely. For the first time, Valentina, the Mafia Queen, looked uncertain, almost flustered. Brianna, Valentina began, her voice softer, but she didn't get the chance to finish. Before either of them could think, Brianna's lips were on hers, the kiss hard and full of unspoken tension. Valentina froze, stunned before she responded, her hand instinctively reaching for Brianna's waist. Brianna broke the kiss abruptly, her chest heaving as she stepped back, only to surge forward again. Grabbing Valentina by the front of her crisp button-down shirt, she shoved her back against the wall with more force than she realized. Valentina let out a low grunt, the impact knocking some of the air from her lungs. But rather than looking offended, she chuckled softly, her lips curling into that maddening smirk Brianna hated so much. "Oh," she said, her voice dripping with amusement. "So you do like it rough?" Brianna's grip on the fabric tightened, her gray eyes blazing. "You think this is funny?" she hissed, her voice low but trembling with frustration. Valentina raised an eyebrow, her smirk widening as she tilted her head. "Pushing me around, a patient no less, with an infected wound? How unempathetic of you, Nurse Rivera." The mocking lilt in her voice sent a surge of anger through Brianna, her body vibrating with the need to shut Valentina up. Her cheeks flushed with heat as she glared at her, but instead of snapping back, she acted on instinct. With a frustrated growl, Brianna yanked Valentina down by the collar of her shirt and kissed her again. This kiss was fiercer than the first, chaotic, messy, and filled with all the emotions Brianna didn't want to name. It was an outlet for every ounce of anger and confusion she felt, and she poured it all into Valentina's lips. Valentina gasped against her mouth, her hands instinctively coming up to grip Brianna's waist. But this time, she didn't tease, didn't smirk. She kissed back with equal intensity, her movements desperate and unguarded, as if Brianna had unraveled something deep inside her. For a brief, fleeting moment, it felt like the world stopped. Brianna hated how right it felt, how her body betrayed her mind by leaning into Valentina, by wanting her even when everything screamed against it. But then reality came crashing back. Brianna pulled away suddenly, her breath coming in sharp gasps as she staggered back a step. Her hands released Valentina's shirt, leaving the fabric crumpled and her collar slightly askew. The warmth of Valentina's body still lingered on her fingertips, and it only made her angrier. "This," Brianna said, motioning sharply between them, her voice trembling with emotion, "is exactly why I need boundaries." Valentina, who had yet to move, blinked slowly, her icy blue eyes studying Brianna's face with an intensity that made her heart race. "You're the one who kissed me," Valentina said, her voice smooth but quieter than usual. Brianna's cheeks flushed. "That's not the point." Valentina tilted her head slightly, the ghost of a smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. "Oh? What is the point, then?" "The point," Brianna snapped, her voice rising, "is that I don't know who you are, Valentina. I don't know anything about you. You show up out of nowhere, you disappear without a word, and you refuse to tell me anything. I can't have someone like that in my life, not with Leo." Valentina's smirk faded, replaced by something quieter, something almost pained. "You're right," she said softly. "You don't know much about me, and that's my fault." Brianna blinked, caught off guard by the admission. "Then why don't you fix it?" she demanded. "Why don't you just tell me the truth?" Valentina hesitated, her gaze flickering away for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was low, almost hesitant. "Because there are things I'm not sure you're ready to hear." "That's not your choice to make," Brianna shot back, stepping closer, her frustration bubbling over. "If you want to be in my life, if you want to be in Leo's life, you need to be honest with me. No more half-truths, no more secrets." Valentina held her ground, her expression unreadable. "You think it's that simple?" "It is," Brianna said firmly. You either trust me enough to tell me, or you leave. Because I can't do this, Valentina. I can't keep wondering what you're hiding. The silence between them was thick and heavy. Finally, Valentina exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing just slightly. You're right, she said again, her voice steady but tinged with something unspoken. You deserve honesty, and I'll give it to you. But I need time. Brianna's eyes narrowed. Time for what? To make sure I can give you the whole truth, Valentina said, her tone deliberate. Not just pieces of it. Brianna crossed her arms, her jaw tightening. You've had plenty of time, Valentina. I need more, Valentina said, stepping closer. Her voice softened as she continued. Please, Brianna, just trust me a little longer. Brianna stared at her, her emotions warring between anger and something she didn't want to name. She hated how much she wanted to believe her, how much she wanted to let her in. But trust wasn't something she could give freely. Not anymore. Brianna didn't respond. Instead, she turned away, crossing her arms tightly over her chest. I need to go, Valentina said softly after a long pause. Of course you do, Brianna muttered bitterly, refusing to look at her. Valentina hesitated, then turned and walked out the door, leaving Brianna standing alone in the quiet apartment, her chest tight with emotions she couldn't name. The graveyard was eerily quiet, the only sound the occasional rustle of leaves in the cold evening wind. Valentina stood still, staring down at the headstone before her. The name carved into the stone sent a pang through her chest. Leonardo Bianchi. The soft crunch of footsteps on gravel pulled her from her thoughts. Valentina didn't need to look to know who it was. Marco's approach was familiar, deliberate, but not intrusive. He stopped a few feet behind her, clearing his throat gently. Boss, he said quietly, as though not wanting to disturb the moment. We found it. Valentina stood slowly, turning to face him. Her gaze flicked to the small box he held in his hands. Marco stepped forward, offering it to her. I didn't think there'd be anything left, he said, his tone softer than usual. But we went back to the old hideout, found some of his things. Figured you'd want to see this. She took the box from Marco carefully, her fingers brushing against the worn edges. Inside, there was a small leather-bound notebook and a bundle of letters tied together with fraying string. Marco gestured to the letters. There are a lot of them. Some for you. But you should probably start with this one. He reached into the box and pulled out a single envelope, slightly yellowed with age. Written across the front in Leo's familiar scrawl were the words, To Val, in case I'm gone. Valentina's throat tightened as she took the envelope. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it, unfolding the letter inside. The ink was faded in places, but the words were still legible.
Valentina, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I hate that I'm leaving you like this, but I know you'll handle it, like you always do. You've always been stronger than me, even if you never believed it. I can imagine you now, reading this with that guarded look, pretending it doesn't hurt. But I know better. I always have. I hate that I won't be there when the silence screams, that I won't be beside you when it all finally breaks you. But more than anything, I hope, God, I hope that when it does, you're not alone, that someone sees you the way I did, knows you, even when you won't let them. Don't carry this alone, Val, please. There's something I never told you. I have a sister, Brianna Rivera. She stayed with my mom after the divorce and took her maiden name. We wrote for years, but she moved recently, and I don't know if my last letter reached her. She doesn't know anything about this life, about what we were doing. I kept her out of it for a reason. She has a son now. His name is Leo. She named him after me. It's funny, I started writing letters to him too, even though he's just a kid and probably can't read them yet. It felt like something I needed to do. Maybe it's because I knew, deep down, I wouldn't be around for long. Find them. Make sure they are okay. But don't tell them who you are. Don't get too close. Brianna and Leo deserves a life far away from all of this darkness, and I don't want you dragging them into it. Just keep them safe. For me, please. I am afraid. Afraid of what's next. Afraid of what comes after this. I acted like I wasn't, like I had it all figured out. But the truth is, I don't. I don't know if there's an afterlife, if there's something waiting beyond all this. But if there is, I'll wait for you. I'll wait to hear every dumb decision you made while I was gone. I'll wait to hear what you became, what kind of life you lived, who you became without me there. I hope you make it out, Val. I hope you find something good. And if there's no afterlife, if this is it, I hope I find you again in another life. I hope we get to do this over, but better. Not as criminals, not as people with blood on their hands, just as two best friends who never had to fight to survive. One thing I know for sure, in every lifetime, in every reality, in every universe, in every possible version of existence, you are my best friend. I'll wait for you, Val, no matter where I end up. Leo.
By the time Valentina reached the end of the letter, her vision blurred with unshed tears. She folded it carefully, slipping it back into the envelope as she tried to steady her breathing. Marco stood silently nearby, watching her with quiet concern. "Boss?" Valentina shook her head, raising a hand to signal she didn't want to talk. She turned back to the grave, clutching the envelope tightly in one hand. She stayed there for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the stone as if willing it to give her answers. She turned to Marco, her expression composed but her eyes raw. "That's all for now. We're done here." Marco nodded and followed her as she walked away, leaving the grave behind. But Valentina couldn't shake the weight of Leo's words, the image of Brianna's sharp gray eyes flashing in her mind. Later, as Valentina sat alone in her penthouse, the letter spread out in front of her. She let herself feel the full weight of it. Leo's words echoed in her mind, his voice so vivid it felt like he was standing in the room with her.
Find them. Make sure they are okay.
She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes as a single tear slipped down her cheek. Now she understood why Brianna had felt so familiar, why she'd been drawn to her from the moment they met. "She was your sister," Valentina murmured, her voice barely audible. "That's why she had your fire. That's why I couldn't stay away." Her fingers brushed over the letter one last time before she folded it carefully and placed it back into the envelope. Valentina let out a sharp breath, staring at the letter on the table. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. Leo had spent years keeping Brianna safe, making sure she never got tangled in this life. And yet, here Valentina was, already in it, already in her life, already... She scoffed, shaking her head. "Yeah, buddy, I really hope there's an afterlife, because I'm gonna kick your ass next time I see you." The humor faded almost instantly. A bitter realization settled in her chest. Or maybe... She exhaled slowly, running a hand through her hair. "You'll be kicking mine." Because she had already met Brianna, already kissed her. Valentina leaned back, rubbing her face. "Leo, she makes me feel alive," she admitted quietly. "I haven't felt that way since I lost you." Her stomach twisted. The truth was staring her right in the face. "I have to respect your last wish, don't I?" She clenched her jaw, her hands balling into fists. She had already gone too far. And now, she wasn't sure if she could stop. Valentina stared out from her penthouse balcony, city lights glinting like shards of fallen stars beneath her. It had been 3 weeks since she read Leo's letter, and decided, for both their sakes, to keep away from Brianna. But the distance had gnawed at her, leaving her restless. She lifted the glass of whiskey in her hand, untouched. I'm trying to keep my promise, Leo. I'm trying to honor your wish, to keep her safe, keep her away from all of this, she whispered to the night sky. The distant hum of cars offered no reply. If you're out there somewhere, if you're listening, give me a sign. Her voice cracked slightly. Tell me what to do because I'm drowning here, buddy. Her phone buzzed. A text from Amanda. Emergency. Breeze wasted. At Velvet. Won't listen. Need backup. Valentina stared at the message, a startled laugh escaping her throat. She looked up at the sky again, shaking her head. Really? This is your sign? Her lips curved into a faint smirk. Subtle as ever, aren't you? She was already moving, grabbing her leather jacket from the back of a chair. As she stepped into the elevator, she muttered under her breath, I hope you know what you're doing, Leo. Brianna's mother had practically shoved her out the door that evening. Leo will be fine with me, she'd insisted, already helping her grandson set up his favorite board game. You haven't had a night out in months. Go have fun with your friends. Now, following Amanda into the bar, Brianna tugged at the hem of her dress and muttered, I can't believe I let you talk me into this. See? This is exactly what you need, Amanda said firmly, leading her toward a table where several other nurses from their floor were already gathered. Besides, it's been weeks since anyone's heard from Valentina. You could use the distraction. Brianna's jaw tightened at the mention of Valentina's name. 3 weeks of silence. No calls, no texts, no irritatingly charming appearances at the hospital. Just nothing. Don't, she warned, but Amanda was already ordering drinks. 3 drinks later, the edges of Brianna's world had softened pleasantly. She found herself at the bar, waiting for another round, when a tall stranger sidled up next to her. Can I buy you a drink? He asked, leaning closer than necessary. I'm good, Brianna replied curtly, but he didn't move away. Come on, beautiful. 1 drink won't hurt. His hand brushed her arm and she jerked away. Not interested, she said more firmly, but the alcohol made her movements slower than usual as she tried to step back. Don't be like that, he persisted, reaching for her again. I'm just trying to be friendly. She said she's not interested. The cold, sharp voice cut through the noise like a blade. Brianna's heart jumped as Valentina materialized beside her, stepping smoothly between them. Even in casual clothes, Valentina radiated authority, her blue eyes glacial as she stared him down. The man scoffed, looking Valentina up and down. This isn't your business, lady. Actually, Valentina said, her voice dropping dangerously low, it is, and you're going to walk away now, while you still can. Something in her tone made him hesitate. He glanced between them, then backed away, muttering under his breath. Valentina turned to Brianna, her expression softening with concern. Are you okay? Brianna stared at her, anger and relief warring in her chest. 3 weeks, she said, her voice trembling slightly. You disappeared for 3 weeks without a word, and now you just show up like nothing happened? Brianna. No. She cut her off, pushing past Valentina. The room spun slightly and she stumbled. Valentina caught her arm, steadying her. Let me take you home, Brianna, Valentina said quietly. Oh, now you care? Brianna laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. That's rich coming from someone who disappeared for weeks. I'm not going anywhere, Brianna declared, yanking her hand away. I'm staying right here until the party's over. Valentina tilted her head, a dangerous glint in her eyes. Oh, really? Yeah, really, Brianna snapped. Bug off. Valentina's lips curved into that infuriating smirk. You know, she said, her voice dropping lower. Usually I enjoy watching people have fun in my club. She gestured around them. Velvet is my pride and joy, after all. Brianna blinked, alcohol-addled mind processing the information. Your, Valentina hummed, catching the eye of a nearby worker. Marco, she called out, and instantly a suited man appeared beside them. Tell the DJ to wrap it up. We're closing early tonight. Of course, Ms. Moretti, he replied without hesitation, already moving toward the DJ booth. The music began to fade, replaced by confused murmurs from the crowd. You can't just, Brianna started. Can't shut down my own club? Valentina's smirk widened. Last chance, Brianna. Either you leave with me willingly or I'll have my security escort you out. Your choice. Amanda appeared beside them, concern etched on her face. Brianna's eyes widened as another realization hit. She whirled on Amanda. Did you call her? The betrayal in her voice was sharp enough to cut. Seriously? Girl. Amanda sighed, spreading her hands. You weren't exactly giving me a choice. I can't believe this, Brianna muttered, running a hand through her hair. She turned back to Valentina, jabbing a finger at her chest. And you just love this, don't you? Having all the power, making everyone dance to your tune? Valentina caught her wrist gently, her touch at odds with her commanding presence. No, she said softly. I just want to get you home safe. Around them, the crowd was starting to disperse as the lights brightened. The other nurses gathered their things, watching the scene unfold with barely concealed interest. Brianna stared at Valentina for a long moment, swaying slightly on her feet. Finally, she let out a frustrated groan. Fine, but this doesn't mean anything. As they stepped outside, Brianna stumbled slightly, and Valentina's arm instinctively wrapped around her waist to steady her. I hate you, Brianna mumbled, but she leaned into Valentina's support. No, you don't, Valentina replied, her voice gentle as she guided them toward her car. The drive was tense, filled with Bree's angry silence and Val's concerned glances. At Bree's apartment, Val helped her inside despite her protests. Val started talking. Brianna, No. Bree cut her off, turning to face her. The alcohol made her brave, made her say things she'd been holding back. The last time you showed up at my door, you had a gunshot wound. A gunshot wound, Valentina. And then you just... What? Disappear for weeks without a word? Her voice cracked with emotion. Do you have any idea what I imagined? Every time the hospital got an emergency case, I thought... She broke off, running shaky hands through her hair. I thought it might be you. Val's expression crumpled with guilt, the usual confidence falling away. I'm sorry. I had to handle some things. Make sure it was safe to... Couldn't what? Bree demanded, stepping closer. Couldn't send a text? Couldn't let me know you were alive? She shoved Val's shoulder, her anger and fear spilling over. I thought something happened to you. I thought... She broke off, emotion choking her words. Val caught her wrists gently as Bree tried to shove her again. Hey, she said softly. I'm okay. I'm right here. I hate you, Bree whispered, but she was clutching Val's shirt now instead of pushing her away. I hate that I worried about you. I hate that I missed you. Val's arms wrapped around her, pulling her close. I'm sorry, she murmured into Bree's hair. I'm so sorry. They stood like that for a long moment, Bree's face pressed into Val's neck, Val's hands running soothingly up and down her back. You can't keep doing this, Bree mumbled against Val's skin. You can't keep showing up and making me feel things and then vanishing. Val's arms tightened around her. I know, she whispered. I'm trying to figure out how to do this right. Bree pulled back slightly, looking up at her with glazed but determined eyes. Then figure it out faster, because I can't... She swayed slightly, and Val steadied her. I can't keep feeling like this. Val helped her to the bedroom, got her water, and carefully removed her shoes. As she pulled the blanket over Bree, a hand caught her wrist. Val? Yes? Are you going to disappear again? The vulnerability in Bree's voice made Val's chest ache. She sat on the edge of the bed, brushing hair from Bree's face. No, she said softly. Not like that. Not again. Promise? Bree's eyes were already closing, exhaustion and alcohol pulling her under. Val leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. I promise. Now get some sleep. She waited until Bree's breathing evened out before standing. At the bedroom door, she paused, watching Bree sleep. I promise I'll make this right, she whispered. Somehow. The next morning, Bree woke to a pounding headache and fragmentary memories. Val appearing like an avenging angel at the bar, the warmth of her arms, the gentle way she'd taken care of her despite Bree's anger. On her nightstand next to a water glass was a note in Val's elegant handwriting. I meant what I said. I'm not disappearing again. V. Bree pressed her face into her pillow, groaning. Brianna's head was splitting. Sunlight streamed through her forgotten open curtains, each beam feeling like a personal attack. Her phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Amanda? You alive? Bree. Barely. Still mad at you. Amanda. Yeah. But I was right to text her, wasn't I? Brianna ignored that last message. The doorbell's ring pierced through her skull, and she dragged herself out of bed, not bothering to change out of her oversized sleep clothes. When she yanked open the door, she froze. Valentina stood there, unfairly put together in casual jeans and a soft sweater, holding coffee and breakfast. Good morning, she said quietly. I brought reinforcements. You actually came, Brianna said. Valentina's lips twitched. I said I would, didn't I? They settled in the kitchen, the smell of breakfast burritos filling the air. Brianna reached for the coffee, surprised to find it exactly how she liked it. About last night, Valentina started. Can we not? Brianna cut her off, cheeks flushing. At least not until I've had coffee and maybe died of embarrassment? You have nothing to be embarrassed about. I yelled at you. I deserved it. They ate in comfortable silence until Valentina spoke again. I meant what I said about not disappearing like that again. Why did you? It's complicated. That's not good enough anymore, Brianna replied, tired rather than angry. Before Valentina could respond, keys jingled in the lock. Leo burst through the door, followed by Brianna's mother. Mommy! Leo burst through the door, stopping short when he saw Valentina. His face lit up. Tina, will you build Lego with me? Valentina's expression flickered with something complicated before Elena stepped in behind Leo. Oh, Brianna's mother said, taking in the scene. Hello there. Mom, this is Valentina, Brianna said, noting how Valentina's usual confidence seemed to waver. Amanda's cousin. Ah, the one sending all those flowers. Elena smiled knowingly. Did you stay the night, Valentina? Mom! Brianna felt her face heat up. She just brought breakfast. Mm-hmm. Just breakfast at 8 a.m. on a Saturday? Elena's eyes sparkled with mischief. How thoughtful. She glanced between them, clearly enjoying her daughter's embarrassment. And you're already comfortable enough to show up in your pajamas, honey. I'm hungover, not... Brianna started, then caught herself. I mean, hungover? Elena's eyebrows shot up, her grin widening. And Valentina came to take care of you? How sweet. I wanted to make sure Brianna was okay after last night, Valentina explained, looking unusually flustered. I'm sure you did, Elena said, her tone heavy with implication. Brianna mentioned you were charming, but breakfast service? That's a new level of dedication. Mom, I swear to God. What? I'm just getting to know your... friend. Elena's emphasis on the word friend made Brianna want to disappear entirely. Leo tugged at Valentina's sleeve, offering escape from Elena's teasing. "Come see my spaceship." Valentina followed him to the living room, her movements careful as she settled beside him. Brianna watched as her son shared his Lego pieces, struck by how naturally Valentina fit into this moment of her life. A few days later, Valentina sat on Brianna's couch, a worn leather notebook and stack of letters in her lap. Her hands trembled slightly as she traced the edge of the weathered leather. "Brianna," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." "Okay?" "I had a best friend," Valentina began, her voice uncharacteristically quiet. "His name was Leonardo Bianchi." The color drained from Brianna's face. She went completely still, her coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips. "I met him when I was 17, Valentina continued, her eyes distant. "I was lost. My parents had kicked me out. I was always the troublemaker. Leo found me when I had nothing." Brianna's hands began to shake. "He was doing small jobs for some dangerous people. When I asked to join him, he tried to talk me out of it. But I was stubborn, and he—" She swallowed hard. "He said if I was going to do it anyway, at least he could watch my back." "You're lying," Brianna whispered. "My brother was a teacher. He was protecting you. When he was killed—" Valentina's voice caught. "I promised I'd make them pay, and I did. I became everything they feared because they took him from me." "When did you know?" Brianna demanded. "About me being his sister?" "A few days later after we kissed, I found these letters, and I realized—" Valentina held up the notebook. "He wrote to you, to your son. So you just kept seeing me, kept getting closer to me and my son while knowing the truth?" "I tried to stay away. His letter asked me to protect you but to keep my distance. But I was already falling for you. That night at the club, when Amanda texted, it felt like a sign. How can I believe anything you say?" Brianna's voice trembled. "My brother is dead because of this life you're in, the same life you've been hiding from me. I would never let anything happen to Leo, either of you. I will do my best to protect the both of you," Valentina said softly. "Like you protected my brother?" The color drained from Valentina's face. "Leo was everything to me. When they killed him, I lost my way. I became someone he probably wouldn't even recognize." "Get out." Brianna's voice was suddenly quiet. "Now." Valentina placed the notebook on the coffee table with trembling hands. "These are his last words. After you read them, if you never want to see me again, I'll understand." After the door closed, Brianna sank onto the couch, her eyes fixed on the worn notebook. Her fingers trembled as they traced her brother's handwriting on the cover. The notebook sat untouched on Brianna's coffee table for 2 days. On the third night, after Leo was asleep, she finally picked it up. "Dear Val," the first letter began. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I hate that I'm leaving you like this." Brianna read through the night. Letters about their teenage years, about how they'd protected each other. His last letter spoke of his sister, of her, and his hopes that she'd never know this life. And then she found it. A letter to her, dated just days before his death. "Brianna, I'm sorry for the lies. Every story about teaching, every made-up classroom adventure, they were to keep you safe, to give you the normal life I couldn't have. But know this. Everything I did to protect you both. Love always, Leo." 2 days later, Brianna found herself outside Valentina's penthouse, her heart pounding as she knocked. Valentina opened the door, freezing when she saw who it was. "Brianna, how did you find where you live?" Brianna brushed past her into the apartment. "Does it matter?" "I read his letters," she said, turning to face Valentina. "All of them?" "Enough." Brianna crossed her arms. enough to understand why he did what he did. But this life you're in, it got my brother killed. I have a son. I can't bring him into this world. I know, Valentina said quietly. Do you? Because showing up at my house, getting close to my son, all while being... Brianna ran a hand through her hair in frustration. I know I've asked for time before, Valentina said, but I'm asking again. Give me time to figure this out, to find a way to make this work. Why should I, Valentina? Because I love you, and I'll find a way to deserve you, both of you. Brianna stared at her for a long moment. I can't make any promises. I'm not asking for promises, just time. Time, Brianna repeated softly. But no more lies. No more lies, Valentina agreed. And no more disappearing. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't even a promise. But for now, maybe it was enough. The penthouse office took up the entire top floor, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Isabella sat behind her desk, her silver hair elegantly styled, her dark suit impeccable. Valentina, Isabella's voice was warm but careful. This is unexpected. I need out, Valentina said simply. Isabella's eyebrows rose slightly. You've become one of my most valuable assets. Why would I let you walk away? Valentina stepped closer to the desk, her voice softening. Because I found something real. Someone who makes me feel alive, not just surviving. She's like breathing fresh air after being underwater for years. When I'm with her, I remember who I was before all of this, who I could be. She paused, her voice catching. She makes me want to be better. Not just for her, but for myself. A knowing smile crossed Isabella's face. Is this about Leo's sister? Valentina's breath caught. How did you... I know everything that happens in this city, KREA. Isabella stood, moving to the window. I remember when they first told me about you. This young girl Leo had dragged along. So stubborn, so angry at the world. She turned, her eyes distant with memory. A year later, when I finally met you, I almost kicked you out, you know? What? Why? Because you reminded me too much of myself. I didn't want you to have the same life I did. Isabella's smile turned sad. Yet I knew you wouldn't stop until you found something, or someone worth stopping for. Like you did? Yes. Isabella's voice softened. This life, it takes so much from us. I lost my Marina to it. Leo lost his life. But you... She stepped closer to Valentina. You have a chance to break the cycle. I'm asking for protection, Valentina said quietly. After everything I've done for the family? Protection? Isabella's expression softened further. Valentina, you're like a daughter to me. Did you really think I would let anyone touch you? Especially now when you've finally found something worth living for? It's not just me I'm worried about. She has a son. Of course. However, Isabella returned to her desk. I can't just let you leave like that. I have conditions. She sat down, her posture straightening. First, you'll need to train Marco properly. Transfer your operations to him gradually. Valentina nodded. Second, you'll maintain certain connections. Politicians? Judges. You'll be my bridge when needed. Isabella's eyes softened. And you'll continue our monthly dinners. Not as business, but as family. I've watched you grow up in this life, Valentina. I won't lose you completely. That's more generous than I expected. Don't mistake it for generosity, Isabella said, pouring them both a drink. You're more valuable to me alive and happy than dead or resentful. She handed Valentina a glass. Now, tell me more about this woman who's managed to do what no one else could. Make my stubborn girl want to change. Valentina stood in Brianna's doorway, heart racing beneath her composed exterior. Can I come in? That depends. Brianna crossed her arms. Are you here to disappear again? Actually, Valentina stepped inside. I'm here to stay, if you'll let me. What does that mean? I talked to Isabella. I'm out. Valentina moved closer. No more dangerous life, no more disappearing. Just a few conditions. Monthly dinners, helping with the transition. Just like that? Just like that. Valentina's voice softened. Val, I love you, Valentina said simply. And I want to build a life together. A real one. Brianna studied her face for a long moment before closing the distance between them. Her hands fisted in Valentina's shirt, pulling her closer. If you disappear on me again. Valentina cut her off with a kiss, deep and desperate, backing her against the wall. Brianna gasped against her mouth, hands sliding into her hair. They stayed like that, lost in each other, until they had to break for air. I'm not going anywhere, Valentina whispered against her lips. I promise. Valentina Moretti had faced down rival families, negotiated million-dollar deals, and survived multiple attempts on her life. But standing in Brianna's kitchen, staring at the recipe on her phone, she felt completely out of her depth. The sound of keys in the door made her freeze. Brianna wasn't supposed to be home yet. Val, Brianna's voice carried from the entryway. Why does it smell like something's burning? Valentina glanced at the pot on the stove, where what was supposed to be a simple marinara sauce had turned into something distinctly less appetizing. Everything's fine, she called back, quickly moving to open a window. Brianna appeared in the kitchen doorway, her eyebrows rising as she took in the scene. Ingredients were scattered across the counter. A thin haze of smoke lingered near the ceiling, and Valentina stood in the middle of it all, looking decidedly less composed than usual. What are you doing? Brianna asked, though her twitching lips suggested she already knew. Valentina straightened, trying to salvage some dignity. I wanted to cook dinner for you and Leo. And how's that going? Valentina glanced at the burnt sauce, then back at Brianna. I'm learning that I may have overestimated my culinary abilities. Brianna's laugh was sudden and bright, filling the kitchen. The sound made Valentina's heart skip, even as her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Well, Brianna said, turning back to Valentina, I guess I'll have to teach you. Brianna moved around the kitchen with ease, gathering ingredients. First rule, she said, handing Valentina a pot, is to start over if something's burnt. No saving that. Second rule, Brianna continued, stepping behind Valentina at the stove, is to watch the heat. Her arms came around Valentina's waist as she reached for the burner control, turning it down. Medium-low, not high. Sauce needs patience. Valentina's breath caught at the proximity, at the casual intimacy of Brianna's guidance. She could feel the warmth of Brianna's body against her back, the sterile scent of the hospital mixed with something distinctly Brianna. Are you paying attention? Brianna's voice was soft, teasing. To you? Always Brianna. The sound of the front door opening made them jump apart. Mom, Leo's voice called out. Grandma let me get ice cream. And he appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face lighting up. Valentina, are you staying for dinner? Valentina glanced at Brianna, who nodded slightly. Actually, Valentina said, your mom's teaching me how to cook. Leo's eyes widened. Can I help? I'm really good at stirring. Later, as they sat around the table eating slightly imperfect but definitely edible spaghetti, Valentina found herself watching Brianna and Leo laugh about something that had happened at school. The domesticity of it all should have terrified her, should have felt foreign after years of living in a world of sharp edges and careful distance. Instead, it felt like coming home. Next time, Bree said as they cleared the table, we'll teach you how to make dessert. Valentina groaned. Haven't I suffered enough? Nope, Brianna grinned, bumping Valentina's hip with her own. Consider it payback for all those flowers you sent to the hospital. Worth it, Valentina said softly, catching Brianna's hand and pulling her close. Brianna's expression softened as she looked up at Valentina. Yeah, she murmured. Maybe it was. 3 months had passed since Val started her transition out of her old life, and domesticity was starting to feel less foreign. Movie nights, family dinners, and helping with homework had become her new normal. But old habits, Bree was learning, died hard. What do you mean he's waitlisted? Valentina's voice carried from the living room, making Brianna look up from her coffee. No, I understand it's a popular program. Valentina continued, her voice sharp. But surely there must be something we can do to expedite the process. Brianna walked in as Valentina switched to a softer tone. Marco, I need you to look into Crystal Lake Summer Camp. Find out who runs it, who they owe favors to. Valentina, Brianna interrupted, trying not to laugh. Are you seriously trying to use your Mafia connections to get Leo into summer camp? Valentina paused. They said the wait list is 3 months long. So we'll wait 3 months. But he wants to go with his friends, Valentina protested. I could just make a few calls. Hang up the phone. But now. Valentina ended the call. I don't see why we can't use my resources for something good for once. Brianna sat beside her. Because normal parents don't strong-arm their kids into summer camp. Besides, what's your plan? Have Marco make the camp director an offer he can't refuse? Of course not, Valentina replied, though her expression said otherwise. Just gentle persuasion. There's nothing gentle about how you do persuasion, babe. Valentina's lips twitched. I just want him to be happy. I know. Brianna took her hand. But part of being a good influence is teaching him patience. Even if I could guarantee no one would know? Valentina. Fine. Valentina pulled Brianna closer. But if he's sad about missing camp with his friends, then we'll find other activities to do together. Brianna finished. Without intimidation tactics. You take all the fun out of problem solving, Valentina murmured fondly. And you're ridiculous, Brianna kissed her. But I love you anyway. Valentina sat on Brianna's couch, watching Leo build an elaborate Lego castle, while Brianna finished her evening routine. This had become her favorite part of day, these quiet moments that felt more like home than her empty penthouse ever had. Mom, Leo called out. Tina says I can stay up until I finish my castle. Val doesn't make the rules, Bree responded, emerging from the bathroom in her pajamas, hair damp from the shower. Worth a try, Val shrugged, earning an eye roll from Bree. Later, after Leo was finally asleep, they sat together on the couch. Rough shift? Valentina asked, noticing Bree's tired eyes. Brianna hummed. The usual chaos. Move in with me, Valentina said suddenly. Bree blinked. What? Or I could move in here, Val continued quickly. Whatever you and Leo would be more comfortable with. She took a breath. I hate leaving every night. I hate waking up without you. And that penthouse, it never felt like home. Not like this does. Brianna sat up slowly, studying Valentina's face. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything, Val said softly. I know it's a big step, especially with Leo, but I love him too, and I want to do this right. Bree was quiet for a long moment, and Val felt her heart hammering in her chest. Finally, Bree spoke. Not the penthouse. What? If we do this, Brianna said carefully, we need a fresh start. Somewhere that's ours, not tied to your old life. Somewhere good for Leo. Valentina's face lit up. Is that a yes? It's a, let's look at houses together and see what feels right? Bree replied, but she was smiling. Val pulled her closer, pressing their foreheads together. I can work with that. And Val? No using your connections to fast-track the house hunting process. Val groaned. You take all the fun out of everything. Someone has to keep you honest, Bree laughed, kissing her softly. The next morning, as they told Leo over breakfast, his only concern was whether Valentina would help him build more Lego castles in their new home. Every day if you want, Val promised, her heart full as she watched Bree hide her smile behind her coffee cup. They were building something new together, something better than any empire Valentina had ever commanded. And this time, she was going to do everything right. I still can't believe you sent flowers to the entire floor just to get her attention, Amanda laughed, reaching for her wine glass. They sat around the dining table in Valentina's and Brianna's suburban home, takeout containers scattered between them. The move from the city had been an adjustment, but the quiet neighborhood streets and spacious backyard had been worth it, especially for Leo. These family dinners had become a regular thing since they'd settled into their new life together. That wasn't even the worst part, Brianna groaned. Remember the giant teddy bear? It was a perfectly reasonable gesture, Valentina defended, though her lips twitched with amusement. You know, Brianna said, tilting her head, I never asked, how do you both know Italian? I mean, I learned from my dad, but... Oh, Amanda took another sip of wine. Our grandmother was Italian. Our dads would send us to Italy every summer. I don't speak much anymore, just understand some things here and there. I practiced with Leo, Valentina said softly, then smiled. He used to correct my grammar constantly. God, you should have seen your face when I responded in Italian that first time, Brianna grinned. I thought you were going to fall over. I was trying to be smooth. You were being annoying, Brianna corrected, but her fond smile took the sting out of the words. Amanda watched them with warm eyes. I knew you two would be perfect for each other. You mean you planned it? Valentina raised an eyebrow at her cousin. Please, you didn't need my help making a fool of yourself. Amanda smirked. Though I have to admit, calling you to pick up drunk Brianna was one of my better ideas. I'm still mad about that, Brianna muttered, but she was smiling as she leaned into Valentina's side. No, you're not, Valentina and Amanda said in unison. In the years that followed, everything settled into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Valentina stepped back from her old life gradually, keeping only the legitimate business connections that Isabella insisted were too valuable to abandon. Instead of late-night meetings in shadowy offices, her evenings were filled with homework help and family dinners. They created something new together, something that felt like it had always been meant to be. That's how they found themselves walking into another parent-teacher conference on a crisp autumn afternoon, their fingers intertwined as they navigated the school hallway. Leo is doing exceptionally well in science, Ms. Thompson said, shuffling through her papers. His astronomy knowledge is quite impressive for his age. Brianna and Valentina shared a proud smile. However, the teacher continued, there have been some incidents. Incidents. Brianna straightened in her chair. Yes, it seems Leo has developed an interesting skill. Ms. Thompson cleared her throat. Hours later, as Valentina loaded the dishwasher in their quiet kitchen, Bree cleared her throat. Lockpicking? Really? Brianna cornered Valentina in their kitchen after Leo went to bed. He was curious, Valentina defended, trying to hide her grin. Besides, he's helping other kids. He's 9. Brianna crossed her arms. What's next on your curriculum? Hot wiring cars? Of course not. Valentina paused. That's not until he's 12. Valentina. I'm kidding. She pulled Brianna close despite her mock resistance. Mostly. You're impossible. But you love me. God knows why. But Brianna was fighting a smile. Just, no more teaching our son your criminal skills. Valentina's heart skipped at the words, our son. Even after 3 years, moments like these still caught her off guard. The casual way Brianna included her in their family. How natural it felt. Fine, she said softly, pulling Brianna closer. Though you have to admit, his focus is amazing when he's interested in something. Like someone else I know, Brianna said softly. You two are more alike every day. Is that a good thing? The best thing? Brianna leaned up to kiss her. Though if I get called into school again because our son is running an underground locker-opening business. That's my boy, Valentina said proudly. Impossible, both of you. The old Tuscan vineyard glowed in the setting sun. Fairy lights strung between the vines creating natural aisles between the wooden posts. The evening air was warm and sweet, with the scent of grapes and flowers, perfect for a wedding. Leo practiced his walk down the aisle one last time, the rings secure in his pocket. His miniature suit matched perfectly with the formal atmosphere, though his excitement could hardly be contained. In one of the villa's upstairs rooms, Amanda helped Brianna with her final touches. The simple white dress caught the golden light streaming through the windows, making her look ethereal. I still can't believe you're marrying my cousin, Amanda said, adjusting Brianna's hair. Remember when you used to hate her? You'll never let us forget it, Brianna laughed, but her eyes were soft with emotion. Though sending those flowers to the entire floor was a bit much. In another room, Valentina stood at the window in her tailored white suit, watching the guests gather below. Everything was perfect. Their friends from home, Brianna's mother chatting with locals in surprisingly good Italian, the sunset painting the vineyard in shades of gold. The ceremony itself was simple, but perfect. When Brianna appeared, Valentina's breath caught. The setting sun painted everything in gold, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. They said their vows in both English and Italian, their words carried on the warm evening breeze. Ti amo, Valentina whispered as she slipped the ring onto Brianna's finger. With everything I am. I love you too, Brianna replied softly. Always. The reception filled the courtyard with music and laughter. Valentina found Brianna at the edge of the vineyard, watching Leo teach some local children a card game, his Italian flowing effortlessly. He's just like him, Valentina said quietly. Your brother would be so proud. Brianna leaned into her wife's side. Of both of us. Under the stars, they swayed together to the music. Family and friends moved around them, but in that moment, they were in their own world. Worth all the flowers? Valentina asked with that familiar smirk. Every single one, Brianna replied, pulling her down for a kiss. From his spot by the fountain, Leo watched his mom's dance, a content smile on his face. Everything felt right, perfect, like all the pieces of their lives had finally fallen into place. The night wound down slowly, stars twinkling overhead, music softening to match the gentle breeze. Tomorrow they would start their honeymoon, showing Leo all the places in Europe. But tonight, they were exactly where they needed to be, together, under Italian stars, writing their own happily ever after. The door closes behind Lana's cheerful exit. Camille's eyes narrow at the director. 15 years I've worked for roles like this, and you want to give it to a girl who got lucky at the Academy Awards? Her voice drops to steel. She doesn't understand what this story means to people. She'll just turn it into another social media circus.